Welcome everyone to the Political Truth. I am your host. What we will be doing is taking a look at the dishonesty in media, pointing it out, and taking a look at a few of the opinions of the day. You will see both the YouTube site and my Twitter scrolling along the top, along with my current Twitter feed of the current news. Before we get started, first thing to take note of is, despite the Oscars harping so much about our President Trump's attacks on fake news and his decline to attend the Correspondents' Dinner tonight, one of his biggest vocal opponents, Warren Beatty, announced the wrong winner for Best Picture tonight in the Oscars. Check that out. I'm sure for those of us who really can't stand him, you're going to lull yourself to sleep tonight. Anyway, let's take a look at the first news that I found, and that was from ABC News, a tweet last night about Pope Francis, who they say quietly reduced sanctions against a handful of pedophile priests. If you notice here in the story, it's taken directly from ABC News. They repeated again, quietly reduced sanctions against a handful of pedophile priests, applying his vision of a merciful church. He is deciding to grant mercy and clemency on those members of the Catholic Church that have previously been seen to be pedophiles and have taken advantage of children while in their care. Read into the article. It's already come back to haunt him once, where an Italian priest was convicted by an Italian criminal court after receiving clemency from Pope Francis. In other cases, priests or their high-ranking friends appealed directly to Pope Francis, using his own words about the merciful church to get petitions in front of him. There at the end, you'll read a quote, "With all this emphasis on mercy, he is creating the environment for such initiatives." A church official who went unnamed because of confidential proceedings. He has rolled back the crackdown that Pope Benedict XVI launched during his short papacy. He has even gone back in the third paragraph and returned the frock to a priest, instead sentencing him to a lifetime of penance and prayer and removal from the public ministry. Doesn't seem very quiet to me, considering they've been in the courts in Italy, and that this seems to be happening a lot. Continuing on was the tweet from the Democratic Party, who listed their new leadership as elected yesterday on Saturday. And one name that you will see missing is Representative Keith Ellison. He was named the deputy chair of the Democratic Party, but strangely, from the Democrats' own Twitter account, his name was not included. This will allow us to see exactly what the name of Representative Ellison to the officership, the elected officership of the Democratic Party, for what it truly was, which was a desperate grab to bring in those far left Bernie supporters back into the fold of the Democratic Party. We will see how this works in the near future. I don't have high hopes, just based on everything else I've seen from them so far. Next big news that was launched yesterday was seemingly from every organization but The Hill, in their need to continually be top of the food chain on Twitter, tweeted out that Breitbart News got an exclusive White House interview with President Trump. Very thinly veiled as to why basically this is them saying, well, why don't we get one? Well, there's been absolutely no one at all who's been able to get a full interview with President Trump or President-elect Trump in his first 2 months or so since the election. Oh, wait. He's only been interviewed 6 times. CBN, Reuters, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Fox Sports, Fox News on a couple of occasions, and his first interview as president with David Muir of ABC News. Sounds like a case of sour grapes to me by the Hill. On behalf of some of the others, I also want to point out the New York Times, Wall Street Journal were 2 of the organizations that were left out of the press gaggle on Friday, who thought that was the worst thing in the world, despite the fact that they actually had full sit-down exclusive interviews with the president. Continuing forward in presidential news, according to The Hill, the longest-serving U.S. diplomat shreds Donald Trump's America First policies in his retirement speech. So let's dig into this a little bit. First off, it wasn't really a speech. It was a letter. And this Representative Dan Freed, he was Ambassador Dan Freed, was the longest-serving U.S. diplomat. You can see at the very bottom, he spent 40 years at the State Department. In his speech or letter, whatever it happens to be, he called for the country to continue its long-standing push for an open, rules-based world. Unfortunately, when you are looking for an open, rules-based world, that requires that there be authority in the world that would enforce those rules and the openness. What he would be looking to do, as you see here, a track record suggests that an open, rules-based world with a united West at its core is an asset and a great achievement and a foundation for more. What he's really looking for here is global governance. The continued open border policy that the United States has had in effect for the last 30 years or so, an increase in UN sanctions, UN control over U.S. sovereignty. So what he's actually looking for is a continuation of the globalist policies that have been in our government for the last 30, 40, 50 years. So obviously he's not going to be happy with what President Trump is trying to put forward, which is not isolationist, but as his chief strategist has spoken about, economic nationalism. Final point tonight from the Washington Post. This was an opinion piece. Stuck out to me. The opinion was that it is time for Democrats to become the party of American exceptionalism. Those of you who are familiar with the concept of American exceptionalism, this tends to be a very right-side, right-wing argument. The person who wrote the opinion piece, Ronald Klain, was a senior White House aide for Obama and Clinton, and was a senior advisor to Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016, her super successful campaign. I'll read through as you read along. As Democrats engage in soul-searching about their future, here's an idea. Progressives should claim one of the oldest ideas in American thought, the concept of American exceptionalism, for their own. Here's the difference. What he's looking for is not the classic old idea in American thought, the concept of American exceptionalism, but the redefined vision of American exceptionalism that Obama put into place. And you can read in the third paragraph here, Obama's vision of an American exceptionalism fostered by each generation's sacrifice at home and abroad is idealistic and progressive, whether peacekeepers in the Balkans, Peace Corps workers in South America, a SEAL team in the Middle East, or a church group welcoming a refugee family into a small town in Ohio. This concept of American exceptionalism was captured well by Hillary Clinton's 2016 phrase, America is great because America is good. of course, that phrase was resoundingly memed against, laughed at by those on the right and many on the left. And the reason for that phrase was never really explained until now. The reason for that phrase was that each American should be okay with giving to those who are not Americans. In each of these situations that are listed, the Balkans, South America, the Middle East, refugee families, this all involves the U.S. giving over some of its wealth and influence to others. That is their definition of exceptionalism for America, is that America is the one that should be doing all of this. This is a continuation of the policy of being the world's police force, being the world's humanitarians, and letting everyone else off the hook. This is the idea that was resoundingly beaten in the last election that put Donald Trump into the White House and sent Hillary Clinton home. Let's read the final paragraph, because there's a lot in this as well. Now, the core idea of Trump's America First Art of the Deal presidency, that America should look out only for America and should not take on any risk, sacrifice, or concession not in its immediate self-interest, represents a fundamental rejection of exceptionalism. It explains why Trump's reaction to criticism of Putin's murderous regime was not to deny Putin's wrongdoing, but to posit moral equivalency between the United States and Russia. You think our country's so innocent. So much for America is that city on the hill. This is a fundamental repurposing of what President Trump has actually said. What he's actually said is that we should take care of ourselves first before we take care of others. And of course, we should always be looking at our own self-interest. We are not a country of the globe. The globe has many countries, one of which is the United States, others of which, Mexico, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Sweden, Russia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. And each of those countries have been many times, the vast majority of the time over the last 50 to 60 years, have looked out for their own self-interest before anyone else in the world. But we should not, according to this, and what is obviously the idea of the left, is that everyone else should be able to do exactly as they do, and for us to be exceptional means for us to give to the rest of the world. This is the basics of wealth redistribution. This is the basics of being privileged. The concept of privilege is that we were born into America, or we immigrated to America, and therefore we are privileged to live here, and no doubt, but this is stating that because we're American, we have a responsibility to the rest of the world, while the rest of the world does not have a responsibility to us in return. With that, I thank you for your time tonight. Look forward to doing this again tomorrow, and we will see you soon.